Hi! A few years ago, I attended a meeting with a major logistic client. The topic wasn't just about the efficiency and profitability. It was just about ESG. The client was struggling to meet a new sustainability requirements from his global retailer client, who demand from him detailed emission data and evidence of ethical labor practices through their whole supply chain. You know, what struck me the most was the ripple effect that it had. Suppliers who lacked the technology to measure emission and document compliance were losing the contracts. At the same time, the companies that have invested in the ESG compliant practices were gaining competitive advantage. That meeting was a turning point for me. I saw how ESG was no longer just a buzzword. It was reshaping business relationships and redefined success in the logistics and the supply chain. It became clear that technology was not just a key to meeting this expectation, not just for compliance, but for creating long-term value. From emission tracking to ensure transparency in sourcing, technology could bridge the gap between ESG requirements and operational realities.
Go Mobility Tech. From digital strategy through custom software automation analytics and IoT to competitive advantage. Technology that drives transport. Go Mobility Tech.
This is the first of 3 recordings, and I will provide you with a key information about the legislative environment surrounding and its direct impact on the logistic and transportation industry. During this session, I will learn you the stages of implementing Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive (CSRD) and how the European Sustainability Reporting Standard work, include their phases of implementation and expanded scope of the reporting, the growing impact of the mandatory ESG reporting as a lead verification and the consequences of the non-compliance, such as financial penalties and the risk of the reputation damage. And I will show you the practical tools as a framework such as the ISO 14083 and the GLIC methodology that simplify the process of the data collection, emission calculation and reporting in the logistics sector. But in the next video, I will explain the detail how emissions are calculated due to the GLIC methodology, and in the third, I will explore the challenges associated with the data collections. Go Mobility Tech. This channel is dedicated to exploring the technological side of supply chain challenges. We focus on how modern tools and innovating approach can optimize logistics and transportation operations. Whenever you are interested in artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, telematics, or sustainability strategies, you are in the right place. Let's drive innovation together! So, let's talk about the most pressing challenges for a logistics and transportation sector today. It's of course ESG reporting. Transportation is a major contributor to global emission, accounting for approximately 14% of all greenhouse gas emission. The pressure is mounting from governments, customers and investors alike, demanding a greater transparency regarding environmental impact. But achieving sustainability isn't just about the good intention. It's a highly complex process. This complexity arises from fragmented nature of logistic industry. Picture this. Fleet of the trucks operating across the multiple countries, warehouses with a varying energy needs, and countless suppliers scattered globally. Collecting accurate data on emission, energy use, and social impact under such circumstances is not a small feat. For several years, ESG reporting in Europe was governed by the Non-Financial Reporting Directive (NFRD). It was implemented in 2017, and it required certain large public interest entities, mainly that which are listed companies with more than 500 employees and either 40 million in annual turnover or 20 million in the total assets, one another which are greater, to disclose non-financial information as a part of their annual reports. These criteria applied primarily to the large companies across various European markets, include publicly traded entities and financial institutions. However, the directive left out a significant portion of the private sector, meaning many smaller and mid-sized enterprises as well as the private businesses were exempt from the reporting requirements. The CSRD, it is a short of the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, was adopted in the 2022, have to replace the NFRD. Unlike its predecessors, the CSRD shifts focus from the non-financial information to sustainability, reflecting the increasing importance of environmental, social, and governance metrics in the corporate strategies. The directive will be implemented in the 4 phases, gradually and compromising much broader range of the companies. The goal is to hold nearly all enterprises accountable for their ESG impact, not just listed companies, but private firms as well. So, under the CSRD, approximately 50,000 companies across the European Union will be now required to report the sustainability. To compare, the previous directive was just only 11,000. This dramatic increase highlights how the European Union commitment to driving sustainability across all sectors, ensuring both public and private entities meet the higher transparency and accountability standards. So let's unpack how new Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, or CSRD, it's set to reshape the reporting landscape. This directive introduced a phases approach to ensure that nearly all major enterprises operating in Europe are held accountable for environmental, social, and governance practices. Here is the breakdown. The CSRD will roll out in the 4 phases, gradually exploring its scope to include more and more organizations. And it already started in 2024. The first wave has covered companies already subjected under the Non-Financial Reporting Directive, NFRD. These are primarily large, public interest entities like the listed companies and financial institutions. These organizations already have some experience in the ESG reporting, but now they will need to disclose even more detailed sustainability information. So, if your company has already reporting under the NFRD, you are the first. This means providing detailed ESG data for your report started in the 2024. But in the phase 2 is where the things starting to heat up. By 2025, all large companies operating in the European market, both listed and private held, will need to comply. A company is classified as large if it meets any of 2 following criteria: more than 250 employees, annual revenue exceeds the 50 million, or total assets are over 43 million. This expands the scope significantly to include thousands of companies that weren't required to report under the NFRD. And by 2026, the directive will extend to listed small and medium-sized enterprises. This means that any of SMEs that trade on the regular market will need to start reporting ESG data. However, you have to know that these companies will be given a transitional period of 2 years to adapt, provided that they have a valid reason for delay. And finally, by 2028, the directive will include large non-European companies with a significant operation in the European market. These companies will need to report not only their European-based operation, but also on the global activities of their entire corporate group. This ensures that large multinational corporations cannot sidestep ESG accountability simply because they are headquartered outside the European market. Okay, so let's move to talk about the most critical aspect of the new CSRD Directive, their audits and fines. As ESG reporting becomes a legal requirement, the question isn't just about whether companies are reporting. It is about whether they are reporting accurately. Because under the old NFRD framework, there was no universal requirement to verify non-financial reports. Some countries, like France, mandate third-party verification, while others, like Poland, did not. So, as a result, the reliability of these reports varied greatly, and only minority of the companies opting for the voluntary audits. But with the CSRD, everything has changed. Starting in 2024, all ESG reports must undergo mandatory verification. This will be conducted by a trusted third party, either financial institutions or other approved entities depending on national regulations. And this shift ensures that consistent level of credibility across all reports. So, initial ESG reports will be subjected to what's called the limited assurance. This level of verification provides a basic review to ensure that the reporting information is aligned with the standards and free of the obvious errors. Things are similar to the review of the process of the mid-year financial statement. So, after 3 years, the European Commission may introduce a higher standard called the reasonable assurance. This level offers a deeper audit, similar to the rigorous check performance of the annual financial statements, providing stakeholders with even greater confidence in the data. So now, we can move to what happens if you will fail to meet the standards. Not compliance with the CSRD can be costly, not only financially, but also in the terms of your reputations. From the financial perspective, in Germany, penalties can reach up to the 10 million or 5% of your annual turnover, whichever is higher. These are no small amounts, especially when you consider the reputation damage that comes with being labeled as a non-compliant. And it doesn't stop at fines. If your reports are found to contain a false or incomplete information, you can face legal investigations. This can tarnish your company reputations, making it harder to attract investors, partners, or even employees. Here is where ESG compliance extends beyond the legal obligations. Banks and investors are increasingly tying credit access and financial decisions due to the company ESG performance. Many financial institutions now require verified ESG data as a part of their lending criteria or investment evaluations. Without verified ESG reports, your company might face higher borrowing costs or even rejection for a green bonds and sustainable financial programs. Conversely, having a credible, independently verified ESG data can open doors to more favorable financial terms and broader pool of the socially responsible investors. So, we have discussed who needs to report under the CSRD. Now, let's dive into what exactly needs to be reported. This is where the European Sustainability Reporting Standards, or ESRS, come into play. Here is the difference. While CSRD defines who must report and when, ESRS lay out what must be disclosed and how. Environmental, social, and governance reporting is evolving quickly, and the European Sustainability Reporting Standards, or ESRS, are designed to meet the unique challenges faced by the different industries. By categorizing report requirements into general, thematic, and the sector-specific standard, ESRS ensures that every sector from logistics to manufacturing can align with the global sustainability goals while addressing its own specific challenges. Every company, regardless of its industry, begins with the cross-cutting standards, like a ESRS 1 and ESRS 2. These establish the foundations for a reporting by focusing on the business models, corporate governance, and overall ESG strategies. But as you might expect, the challenges and priorities differ dramatically between the sectors. Now, thematic standards dig deeper into the specific ESG areas. For example, ESRS 1 focuses on the climate change, requiring businesses to disclose their greenhouse gases emissions across the Scope 1, 2, and Scope 3. What does it mean? Scope 1. There are all emissions of greenhouse gases that occur directly in your company, also known as a direct emission. Then we have a Scope 2. It is an indirect emission, resulting from the purchase of electricity and heat, for example. And Scope 3 is an indirect emission arising from the entire supply chain. For many industries, this involves new complex process for data collection and reporting. So let's consider the environmental challenges faced by the different sectors. For the transport industry, climate change is a top priority, as a sector accounts for a significant share of greenhouse gas emissions. So ESRS also places emphasis on the biodiversity and pollution in this sector, reflecting to the broader and environmental impact. What sets ESRS apart of its focus on the sector-specific standard? This will address the unique sustainability challenges industries like transportation, agriculture, or manufacturing. For example, so the energy-intensive sectors like cement, glass, and chemical industries will need to report extensively under the ESRS E1, it is the climate change, and E5 is a circular economy, due to their reliance on the fossil fuels and the raw materials. But the agri-food sector must prioritize water management and biodiversity as outlined in the ESRS E3 and E4. But let's move to the transport industry meanwhile, because they must grapple with the high climate-related risk like E1, and well as the moderate issue around the pollution and the water use. Until these standards are finalized, companies must rely on the general and thematic standards while identifying their material ESG risks and impacts. For industries, environmental issues are often the most challenging to address. Why? It is because they require comprehensive data collection, collaboration with the stakeholders, and often significantly change the business models. For example, the circular economy is a growing focus to industries like manufacturing and need to minimize waste and redesign products for sustainability. For energy-intensive sectors, achieving decarbonization might require adopting the renewable energy, upgrading production line, or even changing the supply chain. Each sector must also navigate evolving legal and market demand. For example, water use is less critical for a sector like transportation, but it is a top priority for agriculture and food processing. Let's focus on transportation as an example, which plays the high priority of the reducing emission across the scope 1, 2, and 3, which means integrating data from fleets, suppliers, and logistic hubs. Their put effort on the biodiversity highlights the sector impact on ecosystems, particularly when it comes to the land use for infrastructure and the operation. Meanwhile, manufacturing sectors must address issues like pollution control, resource efficiency, and the circular economic principles under the ESRS E2 and E5. For example, the transportation sector must use standards modeled after the frameworks like ISO 14083, which focus on the quantifying greenhouse gases emissions from the transportation. So, even if your sector-specific guidelines aren't available, you are expected to identify and disclose material ESG issues proactively. As we dive deeper into the specifics of the emission reporting for logistics and transportation, let's talk about the foundation tool that's shaping the way of the industry's approach greenhouse gas emission calculations. It is the ISO 14083. If you are aiming for a transparency and accuracy in your emission data, this is the framework you will want to understand. This framework is a Global Logistic Emission Council, GLIC as an acronym. It was firstly published in 2016, and it has become a global recognized methodology for calculating and reporting emission in both freight and passengers transport. It has been designed to align with a key global reporting mechanism. We will focus on the GLIC framework instead of the ISO 14083. You can ask why. Because GLIC is more practical and flexible. This tool was designed specifically for a logistics sector, meaning it takes account into the diversity of the transport modes like trucks, trains, ships, and also aeroplanes, as well as other aspects like warehousing and transshipment. It provides clear guidelines for companies without imposing a rigorous structure. It can be tailored to the specific of your operations and integrated with the existing tools such as national emission registries or the greenhouse gases protocol. Whenever GLIC offers practical examples and guidelines that makes implementation easier, even if you are just starting with your journey with emission monitoring. You know, what set the GLIC framework apart of this focus on creating unified approach for industry? It's not just a calculation tool. It's a step-by-step guide designed to be accessible for businesses of all sizes, ensuring consistency and accuracy in emission reporting. With digital transformation shaping the logistics sectors, tools like telematics and automated data transfer systems are increasingly being integrated into the GLIC methodology. This ensures that the calculation process remains relevant, accurate, and scalable as the technology advances. So, how does it actually work? The framework is structured as a step-by-step guide, written specifically to the industry use. It's designed to be approachable, not overly prescriptive or mathematically, so companies can easily calculate their emission based on their unique role and operations. In addition, it is core content. The framework includes the wealth of the appendices and modules. This provides the critical reference data such as fuel and carbon dioxide equivalent intensively values for various types of the transport. This means you don't have to start from scratch. The framework gives you the tools you need to calculate and report emissions effectively. So now, let's break down the most critical aspect of the ESG reporting for the logistic companies. Is of course calculations. Accurately calculating emission is the foundation for a credible reporting and help businesses identify their key areas for improvement. Here is how the process works, step by step, using the GLIC framework as a guide. The first step is set to the boundaries of your calculations. The GLIC framework aligns closely with the greenhouse gas protocols, meaning you will include all modes of transport in your supply chain, as a truck, as a ships, as a trains and the planes, for example. So, logistics side, that has to be included, like warehouses, container terminals, or transshipment centers. It has to be included relevant direct and indirect emissions, categorized into the scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. So, data collection is where the heavy lifting begins. You will need to gather data based on your operational scope. For example, for first scope emission, you have to collect the data of your fuel and energy that you use of your asset or that they are under your control, like a truck of the fleet or warehouses. But for a scope 2, you have to gather information of purchase electricity and heat, especially if you are using renewable energy contracts. And scope 3, where gathering emission is much more complex, requiring data from the suppliers and third-party carriers. This includes emission across your value chain. So if you operate your vehicles, you should have a direct access to this data. However, if you subcontract transportation, you will need to request information from your suppliers. The accuracy of this data is critical, whether it is a fuel consumption, energy type, or emission factors. Once you have collected your data, the next step is to calculate your emission. The GLIC framework provides emission factors and intensity values for various transport modes and the fuels. These are applied to your activity data, such as ton-kilometers moved to your units produced, and to calculate two key metrics, as total logistic greenhouse gas emissions and emission intensity, such as decarbonization emission per ton of kilometers for a transport or per unit for a manufacturing. For carriers, this calculation is more straightforward, as typically have a direct access to the fuel and energy data. For buyers and freight transport, the transportation often relies on the activity-based methods combining ton-kilometers with a default or the supplier's provided emission intensity values. The GLIC framework also includes modes with the default values to help companies starting out. While defaults are the last resort, they can provide a starting point for companies without direct access to the data. For companies looking for a deeper insight, tools are credible under the framework under the additional precision. To truly understand the environmental impact of your operation, it is essential to include full lifecycle emission. For example, with electricity, zero emission at the point of the use don't account the emission during the production. The same applies to the biofuel and the waste derivative fuels, where production impact can vary significantly. If your operations span multiple transport modes, the calculation must be built leg by leg, from warehouses to terminals and beyond. The subcontracted transport, clear communication with your suppliers is the key. Ensure you're specifically what data are expected and harmonize it across your reporting process. If all of this sounds a bit overwhelming, don't worry. In the next video, we will walk through how the GLIC methodology works in the practice. Step by step, we will break it down and make it simple to understand. So, let's sum up. Environmental, social and government reporting isn't just a corporate buzzword. It's a critical part of being a responsible business in the today's world. Companies are increasingly expected to show their commitment to the greener and more equitable future. But, as we've seen, the road to effective ESG reporting is filled with challenges. Many organizations struggle with collecting reliable data, managing it effectively, and representing it in the way that meets evolving regulations. The reality is that without the right tools, even the most dedicated teams can be overwhelmed. With our customized approach, you are not just getting a one-size-fits-all solution. You are partnering with a team of experts who understand both ESG reporting and the technology behind of it. Our collaborative approach ensures that our tailored cloud solution aligns perfectly with your company's unique ESG goals. When you choose us as your partner, You are not just investing in technology. You are investing in the team with an in-deep expertise with Microsoft Azure and sustainability. Together, we can transport your ESG reporting from a compliance obligation into the strategic advance. By utilizing your services, you are not only improving your reporting processes, but also contributing to the more sustainable future. Whether it is reducing your carbon footprint, enhancing social impact, or ensuring government's transparency, our solution empowers you to make a lasting impact. So what next? If you are ready to take your ESG reporting to the next level, we are here to help. Get in touch with us to learn how Azure Development Services can support your sustainability journey. Together, we can set the standard for responsible business practices and pave the way for a more resilient and sustainable world. Let's create the future where the data-driven insight not only improve your business, but also leave the positive mark on our planet. Thanks for watching, and remember, when it comes to the ESG, every action counts. Let's shape the future of logistics together.
Go Mobility Tech.